Jennifer and Janice, if you're ready, I think we should begin. It's 12 bells.
Please.
You okay for me to start? Yeah? Okay. So welcome everybody. I'm going to attempt to moderate here, and before we start the official talk, I would like to remind everybody and bring to your attention that this talk is being recorded. When it's recorded, it will also be shared by the UNB Arts Centre as they see fit across social media, etc. So you need to be aware of that. Anybody who's not comfortable with that, you need to know that it is being recorded. You could also turn your microphone on mute and turn your video off if you don't wish to be seen. And so welcome, and we begin officially with our territorial acknowledgement. I would like to respectfully acknowledge that the land on which the UNB Arts Centre and on which NBCCD resides and on which we all conduct our business and life is unceded and unsurrendered traditional territory of the Wolastoqiyik peoples. The peace and friendship treaties were signed between 1725 and 1779 between the Wolastoqiyik, the Alnu, and the Passamaquoddy nations and the British. These treaties established First Nations title over these lands, and they provide rules for ongoing relations between nations. Despite the efforts of the Canadian government since Confederation to assimilate and erase Indigenous peoples through government policies and through acts such as the Indian Act and the Residential Schools Act, the resilience of Indigenous peoples has meant that Indigenous traditions continue to influence the Canadian political, social, cultural, and environmental landscape today. And so, just to give you some context, that this talk is part of the Advanced Studio Practice Guest Lecture Series, and we are partnering very gratefully with the UNB Arts Centre, who have hosted and facilitated this discussion. And part of the guest lecture series actually is to give this platform for the advancement and presentation of artists, designers, fine craft practitioners. And our purpose is to model successful contemporary practice, not just to our students, but to the public, to inform, inspire, and to ignite art and design dialogue. And we are very grateful to Marie, to Laurie, and to Oliver, to the UNB Arts Centre for partnering and for making this happen. So I'm going to very quickly read through the bio to present our artists, and then I'll pass it to Marie. So Janice Wright Cheney was elected to the Royal Canadian Academy of Arts, is a recipient of the Strat Butler Award for Excellence in the Arts and the New Brunswick Lieutenant Governor's Award for High Achievement in Visual Arts. Her work is featured in the collections across Canada, including the Art Gallery of Nova Scotia, the Department of Foreign Affairs and International Trade, and the New Brunswick Museum. Her iconic sculpture of a grizzly bear, swathed in roses, appeared in O Canada, a survey of contemporary Canadian art held at Massamoka, Massachusetts in 2012. And Jennifer Lee Webb is a teaching artist with dual citizenship in Canada and the United States. She explores themes of history and globalization through projects, considering mapping, language use, trade and currency, and trending social media platforms. Jennifer is the head of Studio of Drawing for the New Brunswick College of Craft and Design in Fredericton, New Brunswick. And and the hive of creativity that has been her institutional home for the past 20 years. So we're very privileged and excited to hear them both talk about attending the apocalypse. And before they begin, I'll hand this over to Marie.
Thank you very much, Jean. And thank you everybody for attending here today. I'm delighted that we're able to do this online. And thank you to the New Brunswick College of Craft and Design, or sorry, Art and Design. Is it Craft and Design? Art and Design for this virtual walking tour. This exhibition has been in production for over a year, and has ultimately coalesced during this COVID-19 pandemic. And it's required some fancy footwork on everyone's part to reorient our galleries and our programs to this online format. More than ever, we rely on our networks and connections, and I think artists and creators have a unique position in this time of COVID-19. Yes, there are some challenges, but there are also some very unique opportunities, I believe. I'd like to share with you a quote by American writer Rebecca Solnit, who wrote A Paradise Built in Hell. And I came across this yesterday, and I found it very pertinent for today. When a storm subsides, the air is washed clean of whatever particulate matter has been obscuring the view. And you can often see further and more sharply than at any other time. When this storm clears, we may, as do people who have survived a serious illness or accident, see where we were and where we should go in a new light. We may feel free to pursue change in ways that seems impossible while the ice of the status quo was locked up. We may have a profoundly different sense of ourselves, our communities, our systems of production, and our future. So I think, you know, artists are uniquely positioned to show us the way, to show us how to see. So I'm going to turn this over to our artist today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Marie. Thank you. So hello, everybody, and welcome to our talk. Nice to connect with students and friends and family, and to be together for this. So thank you for making it possible, Marie, and all your staff. So here's what's going to happen. I'm going to, like Jen and I put together a little slide talk. It's a PowerPoint. So on your screen, you'll be seeing our work. And we're going to talk separately about the works that we have in this exhibition. And then at the end, like the theme of the work is about networking, and we think that's really relevant for the present situation too. So we're going to talk about a little bit about how our works coalesced in this project, and those aspects of it, and then we'd like to wrap up in a timely way so we leave lots of time for questions. So if you could hold your questions to the end, that would be great, or take note of any questions that you have. It's easier to just keep it flowing if one person speaking at a time, obviously. Is there anything else I need to say to the people, you guys? Can everybody see their screen well enough, or see their images? Because you can go to different options if you can't see it. Okay, thanks. I'll just get started then. So this is a quote that Jennifer wrote, actually, and my name's on it, but interconnectivity is the fundamental paradox of this moment, our downfall and our salvation. And that we just added that as the catalog was going to press, because it seemed very, meaningful. And I think we would be interested in coming back to that too. So I'll just put it in your minds for now. Okay, so I'm going to introduce a little bit about my piece and in the context of my practice. If you know my work, and you know that I do explore the relationship between humans and nature, mostly looking at our relationship with animals so far. But in the last three years or so, I broadened the scope of my inquiry to include fungi. My curiosity, or some might say obsession, with mushrooms was sparked by foraging, harvesting wild edible mushrooms, which led to considerable reading and research, which you must do if you want to be careful about the mushrooms that you're picking and eating, obviously. And this eventually brought me to a new understanding, though, of the significance of fungi to, well, everything. I began to understand how the presence of fungi is essential to a healthy forest community, to biodiversity. And on this tree, in this image that you're looking at, it's a picture I took of a tree in Odell Park where I walk regularly. And what we see are polypores that are growing on the tree. To be honest with you, in the past, I didn't pay that much attention to mushrooms. And I even sort of thought some of them were sort of ugly. Now I find them to be very beautiful, I think, because I understand their significance. The polypores are growing on a tree at the end of its life here. And what you need to understand, though, is that they're actually helping with the decomposition of the tree by essentially slowly digesting the fibers and returning valuable nutrients to the soil. So inspired by my observations and thinking about polypores on tree trunks, I started making mushrooms, felting them specifically and attaching them to found objects. For example, old drawers that I had collected and, you know, sort of as I do in my studio, acquire things that I think I may use at some point. They have some sort of meaning or reference that I want to pull out. So here, like they're wooden drawers and they're situated in such a way that they mimic a tree trunk on the wall and the mushrooms are sprouting from them. And then some columns and some newel posts that I also had collected. So the idea, of course, is that again, the column stands in for the tree trunk. And I'm suggesting that nature is reclaiming the object, a triumph of nature over culture, if you will. The idea about that nature could flourish in a ruin in this way, and imagining ecological life in a possible future. By the way, this title for this series of works is Fera Moira, which loosely means wild fate. It's a combination of both Greek and Latin words, and it's a reference to rewilding, which is a progressive approach to conservation, an approach that I've been really interested in, I've been reading about, essentially allowing nature to take care of itself or to resume without human intervention. Okay, so as part of the series Fera Moira, mushrooms and mushrooms growing on things, I made this work, which is called Elysium. And this is the work that would be in the gallery right now if we weren't having a pandemic and the gallery wasn't closed. This work would be installed at the UNV show right now called Attending the Apocalypse. These are studio shots of the work in progress, and I'll expand on that in a minute too. Anyway, so what are we looking at? These are mushrooms that are sprouting from the bed of an old crib, a rusty old crib. And what you see beneath is the mycelium, which I have made a crocheted version of that is hanging below the mushroom, and it actually continues and spreads on the floor, the gallery floor, let's say. But first, a word about mycelium, just for context for you. So we have an artist's sort of illustration here across seven, and then an actual photograph of mycelium for you to look at. So thinking about this, when a mushroom emerges on a forest floor or on a rotting log, what you are seeing is merely what's called the fruiting body of a much larger organism, which is called the mycelium. The mycelium is a network of fungal strands called hyphae, which branch continuously in all directions. So I just love imagining this invisible network underneath the forest floor. When we walk, we're not really aware of it, but it's doing some really, really important work. Mycelium interacts with plant roots, creating what is called the mycorrhizal network, an interspecies companionship between fungi and plants. And that network is a vibrant force in the multi-species forest community, enabling communication and distributing nourishment between species. So, pretty important. And then my idea in my piece Elysium is I wanted to make visible this silent and mysterious organism. So yeah, these are some studio shots. So you see that the crib and the mushrooms, and the detail of the mushrooms, you can see they're made out of felted wool, and the mushroom caps are silk and silk organza with another layer of either lace or snakeskin on top. So you're sort of creating little variations in color and texture on the top. And the mycelium, as I said, was actually made with crochet. I'll come back to that. This is a picture of the gallery floor at the UNB Art Center. And this is just a few months ago, I went and checked, right? Imagine, if those of you who have been to the UNB Art Center can picture the West Gallery. It's a beautiful gray floor with gray walls. And imagine my crib was going to be the only piece in that room. And so I think that would be so beautiful, actually. I hope we can still do it at some point, just to see it and maybe take pictures of it and maybe celebrate the end of the pandemic. I don't know. But here you can imagine the work in the gallery, because that would have been what the show was from my contribution to the show. But since we weren't able to install it, I'm going to show you some pictures from the work when it was installed at Art in the Open, which is an open air festival of contemporary art that was, well, they have it every year in Charlottetown, PEI, but I was invited to be part of it in 2018, so almost 2 years ago. So it's an outdoor festival. It actually was really nice to install the work in the forest, on the forest floor. So if you can understand, it's the crib, and then the mycelium branches outwards and beyond the crib. So here's some pictures of that work, some close-ups, and more images. And I'm just going to end my presentation about my piece of work with talking to you for a second about mushrooms as symbols of hope. So if you think about all of these things, like, well, the crib obviously represents life and birth. And, you know, mushrooms are all a sign of life. They are a symbol of the persistence of a life force. In the long history of life on Earth, fungi are present at the beginning and the end. And the title for my piece, Elysium, comes from classical mythology, and it's Elysium, or the Elysian Fields, was the home of the blessed after death, the final resting place of the souls of the heroic and the pure. So that's the meaning of the title, which I really struggled with, but I was happy when I finally settled on that title for this piece. So there you have it. That's my work, and I have lots of background reading, and anybody's interested, I can share lots of my research and resources with you. But this became an important book that I didn't even come across till after I had been already doing the work with the fungi and the found objects, the architectural salvage. I love the title, and this is going to be a good segue into Jen's work, The Mushroom at the End of the World, on the possibility of life in capitalist ruins. That's my part. So over to you, Jen.
Thank you, Janice. So picking up on the theme of networks, I was away from Canada working on a project about the use of English as a lingua franca, default common language of global communication and trade. And I was noticing the broadcast of the tweets in English of the President of the United States on the Daily News in Barcelona. I was already thinking about the privilege of being able to communicate in English in the globalized world economy, and working with that theme. And then noticing just the airtime and the networks of basically the social communication platform of Twitter that was giving his text such a spread worldwide. Next slide, please. So I looked up the Twitter account of the US president and quickly found the Trump Twitter archive, which is an online index of everything coming from his Twitter account since the beginning of his activation of the account, Real Donald Trump. So I started to think about selecting a tweet, trying to winnow through these tweets as a series, as a painting series, starting in the year 2015, leading up to the federal election in the US, which took place in 2016. And then cutting it off at 2020, which November 2020 is allegedly scheduled as our next federal election in the United States. And trying to distill something about this Twitter account in a painting series. And I wanted to use gold paint and also 24 karat gold leaf letters. And that's pretty much as far as I had gotten with the concept at that point. This is the spring of 2018. Next slide, please.
Go past, want me to go past this one?
Are we at the Beaverbrook?
Yeah, you're at the Beaverbrook. You can't see it? You can't see the slides?
Yeah, I'm good. My first chance to try the scale and format of the series was in the fall of 2018. I had the chance to be an artist in residence at the Beaverbrook Art Gallery here in Fredericton, New Brunswick, Canada. We stretched the first canvas on the wall with staples. I was able to create a grid of 144 characters, which was related directly to the 140 characters of the sort of what Twitter was using at the time as a as a format. And my canvas, the concept was an 8-foot by 5-foot panel with 8-inch by 5-inch letters in the proportion of the golden section. And so there was a nice parallel there. Next slide, please. The research for this has caused me to spend time reading the founding documents of the United States, including the Constitution, the amendments, and the Declaration of Independence. The words "we the people" is the preamble to the Constitution. This text became my 24-karat gold leaf letters in the series. It's basically a word search that spans all 6 of the panels. Next slide, please. I purposely selected topics that touched on the various facets of the Trump presidency as I heard it over the news media, first in Spain, then Canada, and then in the US, back in Canada. Janice, maybe can you flip through to Chill Greta Chill? So I was attempting basically through the series to capture something about the sort of the various topics that are covered in the tens of thousands of tweets that are present in the Twitter archive. And so Chill Greta Chill captures something about the topic of climate change. That's why I selected it. We can go to the last panel, Janice. So the 2020 panel was actually destined to remain blank for the scheduled April 3rd opening of our show. I realized the federal primaries were happening in the US. I didn't feel comfortable electing a tweet until after the election in 2020 had passed. And so I was kind of resigned to just leave that one for April 3rd opening. But then with the rapidly unfolding world crisis this spring, I realized that this tweet from late March would probably capture the moment. And so I talked it over with Janice and with Marie and decided to go with this one. And I was stretching and priming the canvas in our painting studio at the college, actually, just before we were removed the building. Basically, we were able to take, Janice and Peter actually helped me move the canvas out of the school, and then the school was closed down, and here it is behind me in my dining room. It's where I finished it. So our city is basically on lockdown like everywhere else in the world for the pandemic. I stenciled and painted this one right here. Okay, that's pretty much what I had to say about my piece.
Okay, so this is great. We've now at the point of talking about our collaboration, or the bringing together of these 2 bodies of work, which are really conceived and executed separately, but then began to take on extra meaning over the past year as we realized what was, I guess we should just sort of tell the story. And this little page here with the Post-it notes on it was just our way to try and share with you like the thinking behind some of the collaboration and the shared themes, and as it unfolded. So Jen's gonna jump in here too, but I'll just tell you that this all on, I think it was March 1st, 2019, we ran up to the UNB Art Center on lunch hour or something from the college to take in the show by Anna Torma, the wonderful, actually New Brunswick-based recent recipient of the Governor General's Award for High Achievement in the Arts in Canada. So if you don't know Anna Torma, you should definitely check her out. We went to see Anna Torma on the last day that it was up at the UNB Art Center, and then Marie had a conversation with Marie, and we were each walked away with being given space in the gallery. Jen had already had a plan to exhibit there coming up in 2020, but Marie extended the space to me, and I got excited about the possibility of putting my crib in that room as I described. And then Jen and I thought, this is going to be weird because our work has nothing to do with each other.
It really did.
We didn't, and then about 24 hours later, we were like, oh my God, the works are deeply connected. So you go ahead, Jen, speak to that. This is the first Post-it note, and then we can go to this one.
Well, yeah, so the project as a collaboration really snowballed once we both had that realization how conceptually and aesthetically the two bodies of work complemented each other, and then kind of jumping in with the collaboration with the Art Center, with Marie and with Lori in graphic design. We've just really been collaborating on the catalog for months and months and months now. And it's really, I feel like the catalog is really a third work. We have each have our own pieces, but the catalog really is the third piece.
Absolutely. And the notes just kind of tell the story of how, like, I'm thinking about networks, I guess, like the forces of the mycelia as like a benevolent force in the universe, and but also opportunistic, and how it just sort of spreads and grows. And then we see this parallel to like the spread of Trump's tweets, and we've been, now understand through diagrams and algorithms how information is dispersed in this way and repeated and so on. So we saw those as two big parallels in our work that were like the two invisible networks, like mycelia is underground and Twitter is like sort of in the ether. So this theme of networks became very, very important. And then I guess you can see from the notes some of the things that we looked at. Like, here are some of my research and some of the reading that I did and thinking about like rewilding and regeneration and mycorrhizal networks. And Jen is thinking about, political models, different commentary and writing about, like we brought Hannah Arendt along. And then we had to come up with a title for the show because Marie needed it, because it was time to sort of put those commit to things for the catalog. And Jen, you talk about our attending the apocalypse we came up with that in January, I think.
Well, we were looking basically for a verb. We were committed to, with the word apocalypse, but we're trying to come up with a verb. And then so really completely ironically, here we are with this name for our show. And meanwhile, there was nothing about COVID-19 really going on at the time that we were working on this in the early days. Yeah. So I don't know, those bottom right two slides are two Post-it notes on the screen. Those are so recent. It's crazy, honestly, when I look at that, how this all unfolded.
So we wanted to bring it to this point to where, like, sort of like come back out and to bring it to the present moment and think about this concept of interconnectivity and the meaning and the how relatable that is, because now we're all connected to each other. So we're relying so much on social networks to communicate and connect with our family and friends and our students, our colleagues, but also the way the spread of the virus, which is also a network. And should I just go to this slide, Jen? Or do you have anything else?
Yeah, I think we can probably wrap it up. Absolutely.
Wrap it up. We came across this, which shows the map, projection for how coronavirus could be shared when it was from Wuhan and beyond, in this kind of radial networking, spreading, diagram, and which is eerily similar to the growth of mycelium in a petri dish. That's the accompanying slide. So these systems, I guess, systems and networks become increasingly relevant.
I think the links that we make as artists, speaking for myself, I guess, but there's a conceptual link that we worked with, but then the visual links, like that last slide, like when it registers when you're when you're a visual person, right, you just immediately, like, that resonates as having meaning because of the similarity and the relatability of the visual.
We wanted to leave time for questions, and I think we've done okay there. Like it's 12:30, so I feel good about that. Should we? How do we proceed from here, you guys? And we can go back to a slide if anybody would like to revisit an image and ask a question about a particular work or anything at all.
Before you head into questions and answers, I wanted to say congratulations and thank you so very much for sharing that on behalf of all of us. I have noted we have 60 participants today at this talk. And so I think that that is itself a very good network and a good sign. And I guess, yes, we can throw this open to questions and answers. And there's a chat window if people can't raise their hand, or you could type the question. I had a quick comment myself, if it's okay.
Of course.
What I liked about this was how very often when I think of my own practice, or maybe even when other people think of artists, they think of themselves as individuals, and they think of an individual practice, and we kind of like work on our own. But I think even through this pandemic has made me reflect so much more on my relationships and my relationality, even as an individual to others, and how I sit within a community and I need a community. And while you're looking at this as that connectivity, and we're seeing these beautiful images, I think it kind of reflects my own personal reflections and feelings of that, and how we maintain that connectivity, and also how creativity as an activity and a way of being and a way of knowing and a way of doing is itself borderless. It can't be contained. So I really appreciate those images. It's a wonderful talk, and thank you.
Thank you, Jean. Patrick Flanagan had his hand up early. I wonder if somebody could. Patrick?
Yes.
Hello. Hi, sorry. You had a question.
I didn't have a question. My only question was trying to figure out this Zoom outfit, so I was trying all the buttons. Sorry about that.
Oh, no problem.
Okay. I enjoyed it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I wonder if we could see the Jen's pieces again. They went by really quickly.
Okay, there's 6 paintings, so I'm going to go back to the first one, you guys.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Is this Lee?
Yes, it is.
I recognize your voice.
I was wondering how you picked the ones you did also. Why you picked those ones.
Well, I was trying to stay topically. From the outset, I wanted to not go down like one rabbit hole and knowing that I would probably do 6, have the topics be broad. But then it's a huge Twitter account. There's, I don't know, 20,000 tweets, right?
Yeah.
So many themes, so many ways to think about what the content would be. So I picked the major themes as they occurred to me, and that's, the last one is obvious. The coronavirus was very, very obvious. The climate change commentary was obvious. This one that's on the screen right now, Hallmark of Democracy, it probably reads as ironic, and it is ironic because it refers to when the NFL players were taking a knee in protest of the treatment of African Americans in the United States, and there was a huge Twitter fight actually with Trump, and lots of tweets that came before this one about removing people from the MFL and so on and so forth. But so this is widely believed to be something that he didn't actually write. So it was put up on his account, but it's not how he was handling that situation.
Not at all.
No, exact opposite. So this one is an ironic selection.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thanks for the question.
Jen, are you seeing the questions that are typed in?
I can't. So yeah, can somebody feed me some questions?
Right.
I
So
can't see anything.
Marilyn asks a question. Marilyn Luscombe says, I'm wondering how Jen managed her mental health as she reviewed all the
it gave me some distance. Actually, I think that's also ironic, but somehow committing to this process forced me to have some distance from, sort of trying, and also maybe thinking about what he's actually doing, like sort of the showmanship and the charade and so forth. And they're his words. And part of what I was trying to create with this body of work was I didn't alter any of his words. If you are a Trump supporter, you might like these paintings, right? Because they're his words. And if you are not a Trump supporter, you may see some irony in some of the ones that I have selected. So, but at the end of the day, they're just basically 6 tweets that came from that Twitter account.
There's a comment here in the Zoom chat box from Anita, who says, I love anything post-apocalyptic, so the combination of Twitter and its social network and the decay assisting fungal network feels so appropriate.
Thank you.
I was thinking of how there's a book that was written recently called The Death of Truth, which speaks in particular to Donald Trump's tweets. And there's a section in it where they speak to how this death of truth and his words being a defining treatise of our age, and how it kind of diagnosing the roots of our decaying social and political order. And so it is this wonderful combination, but there's also a contrast. And I wondered how, with the fungi and the mushroom being something that was there at the beginning and at the end, kind of this idea of the alpha and the omega, this like existing survival of life and truth, and yet the words of Trump kind of in contrast to that being this transient thing, or really words of death, or the death of truth. So while there's lots of similarities with the networks, they're both kind of fire and water in terms of what they're portraying.
Yeah, really good. Yeah.
And for that reason, Jean, that's how I settled on putting the preamble of the Constitution, We the People, in the 24 karat gold throughout these 6 panels, to kind of allude to what you just referenced.
Yeah.
I feel like I saw, apparently other people had their hand up, but I can't, somebody has to feed us the questions.
So we have a question. There's one in Nikki. I'm going to unmute Nikki. Do you have a question, Nikki? And then Matt?
I started typing, but it got a little bit lengthy. So I just want to say thank you both so much for this collaborative project. It's a shame that we can't be there in person, especially I imagine, Jen, you've chosen to use canvases that are quite large. I feel like that alone has significant impact. And Janice, I feel like not being able to be in that room with your installment or your installation. There's nothing we can do. It's a situation, but it's almost ironic, and I feel like that really fed into the theme behind what you both have created. and the way that all of us here are now attending your Zoom conference. I feel like that too can be part of your narrative, and I'm really looking forward to seeing how that affects you and your work. I know this isn't really a question so much as just I'm reflecting on what's happening right now too. So I just really hope I can stay in the loop. I really want to know if this will be a gallery show again in the future, and if there's a way that we can kind of stay on your news feed for that.
Lovely comment, Nikki.
I'll just say, as the UNB Arts Center, if you want more discussion on some of the stuff we're talking about right now, go to our website. The catalog is up on there. And if you follow the UNB Arts Center's Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, there is more about the show or the potential show.
Perfect. Perfect. Thank you.
And yeah, I'm glad. I wanted to double back on the catalog too. Thank you, Marie, and talk and sort of, if any, those of you that are attending with us today at this event, if you haven't checked out the catalog, it's available as a PDF on the gallery site, and the works are also like installed on the website now too. But the catalog is so good. We're so proud of it, and Marie just wrote a beautiful essay, and it's so nicely designed, and it really is a really, really strong capture of everything we're doing here. And Marie did a lot of really good research too that strengthens all the things we're talking about. And about installing I would still, speaking personally, I would still, even if we could only have the show up for a short time, I would love to still put the work in the gallery after all this. No, I don't even know when that would be. We don't know. But I think to me, it would still feel really like a powerful thing to actually physically enter the space and put the work in there and light it and take a couple pictures, maybe have a little celebration, and then, you know, move on with whatever happens after that. But we just don't know, I guess, if that's going to be possible.
We have another question from Matt.
Hi, thank you guys very much. That was excellent. Jen, you had mentioned how originally, or how there were 6 panels, but then with the 6th one, you had to change it. Or you made a decision to do the tweet relevant to the coronavirus. Are you planning on waiting till after the election and maybe doing a follow-up, or coming up with another piece around that time to follow this and see what goes on then as well?
Well, thanks, Matt. When I pitched this idea to the NB sort of NB Arts, I really didn't know. At one point, I think in my proposal, I actually said something about, you know, maybe he'll be impeached or maybe he'll get another second term. Well, there was a moment this winter when he was actually impeached, and also he may get a second term, right? So it's been a moving target since the very beginning. But I feel at this time right now, I feel like I'm done. So I don't know.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thanks.
So Danielle has a question. Danielle Hogan. Danielle, can you unmute yourself?
Are you there, Danielle?
If you hold or press Alt-A, it's the toggle to mute and unmute yourself if you can't find the shortcut on the window.
Thanks, Nikki.
Or if you would like to type your question in the chat bar, we can relate that. There's a comment here from Alison Marr, and she says, I'm in Vancouver and really appreciate this online artist talk and being part of the organic network related to the show. And she says, thank you so much.
Thank you very much for being here with us.
Thank you, Allison.
Brigitte says, thank you both for sharing your work. This was a strong presentation. I do hope that we can see the work in person someday.
Thanks, Reg.
Thank you, Brigitte.
May I ask a question about your process and materials, Janice?
Please.
How did you come up with how to render the things that you did, to crochet things and to use the silk and felted work?
Good question. Sometimes I can't remember how I came to it. It just seems helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I feel like, as you know, I describe my practice as being textile based, but the form, the textile itself varies from project to project. I find felting works really well sculpturally, and you can imitate a lot of life forms with felt. And I knew that it would work quite well. I could create good facsimiles of mushrooms with felt. I knew they would work. I'll go back and look at the ones on the, if you don't mind, I'll just go to these ones. Just studying the polypores in the woods. I collected specimens too, and then I practiced imitating them in felt with like the different kind of edges or the way the growth forms on the fungi, and just paying attention to all the little variations. So I sort of made a repertoire. I had drawers and I labeled them by species, and then I started putting them on the columns and so on. And I was satisfied that the felt was a good way to imitate. And then with the mycelium, like this important part, wanted to make the mushrooms here have to sprout. They have to have a stalk and a top.
Yes.
I wanted them to have, like, you know, when you see like a sprouting of mushrooms in the forest, and even though they're all the same species, there's little variations in size and color. So I wanted to sort of capture that with the little variations. I don't know if I mentioned this or not, but I actually used mushrooms to dye some of the silk too, to create some of those.
Oh, cool.
It was very exploratory. I just play until I'm satisfied. Yeah. And of course, crochet. I mean, crochet is like drawing. You can, you know, you crochet out and you come back, and you out and come back. Like you can make it do that. So.
Yeah.
I have a comment.
Thank you.
I feel like this came out of your polar bear piece with the snowflakes.
Yeah. Well, I taught myself how to crochet to make that. I didn't. That wasn't my skill.
And those were all different, right? And that was the whole point, was the snowflakes were similar but not the same.
Yes, thank you. That's true, because there's little variations because they're handmade, so they can't possibly be the same. Yeah, that's right.
So we have two questions that have come in. One is for Jen, so maybe I'll give that to you, and then there's another one for Janice. So Jennifer, Lydia Stewart says, Jen, at first, you said that you knew the materials you wanted to paint and use were gold leaf. And why the gold leaf, and why is it symbolic?
Thanks, Lydia. Awesome question. I called the series Scratch Cards for the Apocalypse. That was my working title all along. And so the idea for having artificial gold and real gold conceptually was that, you know, in the event of an apocalypse, a post-currency society, that if there were a gold standard, that perhaps the 24-karat gold would actually have some value. But then in my research, I actually came around to understanding that we don't even have a gold standard anymore. Did you know that? There is no gold standard. So I don't know, we're printing all this money around the world to kind of, you know, prop up our economies. But in actuality, it's not really a thing. So, but that was the concept. Thank you for the question.
Thank you, Jen. And there's a question then for Janice, and it comes from Megan. And she says, your work is focused on animals, as you've said. Did you notice any change in your process shifting from animals to fungi, where people may be less or more receptive to this work?
Okay, Miss Jean, I'm sorry, you broke up a little bit and I missed a part in the middle. So regarding animals, say that again. Can you repeat it?
Yeah. She says, did you notice any change in your process shifting from animals to fungi?
Not material wise, not so much maybe. Often I do, like a way I realize that I work sometimes is I like to make things in multiples. So back to Jen reminding me that I learned how to crochet through the snowflakes, and then extended that technique into, it seemed like the logical way to make the mycelium, because it's, it's crochet, it's yarn, it's white. You can, get it to do all these things. So this would, the crochet would relate to working in animals with the same material. So I don't know if I'm answering it or not, but I don't think there's any big difference. Like I sort of seem to do the research. I just have to think about how I want to represent my ideas in a material. I experiment, and then my happy moment is when I settle in and realize what it's going to be, what it's going to look like, and how I'm going to do it, and then I can just start making it. So I think in many ways the approaches are, no matter what the concept is, my working the idea through to the material and then the production of it is the same, across projects. I hope that made sense.
Yes, thank you.
Good question.
Do I have my microphone sorted out?
Hey.
Here she is.
Sorry, that actually happened to me earlier today. I had to close everything out and come back, so I apologize for that. So due to my technical difficulties, my question is actually from a little bit earlier in the conversation. Jean was mentioning about the book, what's it called? The End of Logic, or The Decline? What was the
It's Kakutani's book called The Death of Truth.
The Death of Truth. Okay. So my question kind of something of a musing with a question, hopefully at the end. But I've just been reading, and ironically, it's here on the table next to me, these essays by Zadie Smith, and in there, she's talking about, in the second essay or third essay on, it's called Fences, a Brexit Diary. And in that essay, she's talking about logic and how different political parties and all of us have, our own different and varied political leanings. And I was just reading that this morning and then thinking, Jen, about Trump's tweets, and then Jean, when you mentioned about the death of logic, wondering whether there actually ever could be, or whether we're sort of there's a little bit of a self-aggrandizing as a global community, that somehow we're living in a world where something is ending, or rather, if it's more this constant belief that our time is somehow different from all the things that have happened again and again and again and again, and I guess, or happen repeatedly, all these endings that are constantly occurring and repeating, and therefore not endings at all. And I guess that obviously links, Janice, to your work in this idea of decomposition and regeneration. And so I guess, as much as anything, I'm wondering if you could maybe just comment rather than answer a question, but on this idea of how we're living in a time where we feel like there are so many things that are, the end of truth, or the end of our ability to travel freely, and, with COVID-19 and the all these endings, when in fact, if we look back through time, this is constantly happening. It's just, yeah, I'll stop there. I'm just wondering if you could maybe comment on that.
Well, thank you, Danielle. I'm just fascinated with that context, I guess, historically and geographically. So yeah, it's a theme. I can't get enough of exactly that sort of just musing about what it means, and what time, sort of our time and place in in history and, you know, where civilization has come from and where we're going.
Yeah, I don't have anything else. That's really interesting, Danielle. Really, really thoughtful. And I feel like you said, the end of one thing is the beginning of another. And that is definitely like backing away and looking at things even in geological time and understanding like bigger cycles. And it can sort of be reassuring to think like that way. And could I recommend right now, if anybody is interested, the movie Fantastic Fungi? It's just out, and you can get it on Vimeo. You can rent or buy it, and it'll give you like a really uplifting feeling, I think, about possibility. And maybe I'll just leave it at that.
Thank you so much. Thanks for that comment and observation as well, Danielle. It made me think of what you mentioned, Janice, at the beginning of your talk about the rewilding, that all of these cycles, like not so much a death, but it is a type of rewilding and regeneration. Ellen Woliver has written quite a lovely long comment. She says, it's wonderful how you two can work in separate studios with great thought and research and testing and creativity. And then in the end, how much alike your work became, all the connections.
Thanks, Ellen.
Thanks, Ellen. That's it. That's true.
Yeah. So we have about 3 minutes left. I'm wondering if there are any other questions, if people would like to raise their hand in their chat window.
I'm not sure how to raise my hand, but can you hear me? It's
Yes.
fast. Oh, I just had an observation about Janice's work. I also have something to want to say about Jen's, but I love this kind of, I don't even know if it's a metaphor of the use of the crochet coming out of the crib and thinking of mothers, you know, caring for their upcoming babies, and how we would crochet blankets or sweaters or such, and in such a nurturing, you know, maternal way. And I wondered if that had entered at all into your thought processes, that connection of mothering and caring.
I love what you just said. Thank you, Beth. And yeah, sort of, because yes, but not exactly the way you put it, but I have thought about those things. And also just the very, like, the taking care of things, is to me like, and it's part of my practice. It's a slow way of making things. So to replicate, like, it takes a long time to make these, you know, these units that become the big mat or lacy spread of mycelia. And so for sure, like the taking care of it, just the act of just repeating the motion of crochet over and over again is a thoughtful and caring way to be with nature or think about that aspect. Of course, working in textiles, you totally already have all those connections to, like, historical women's ways of making and making clothing for babies, for sure. Also, the very idea of mothering, like back to this film, Fantastic Fungi, and reading I've done about mycelia, but there's references to the mycelia as being the mother. And the fruit and the mushrooms are like the product of the mother. But sort of, it's different than the tree and the roots in a way. Because the mycelia is the thing, and the mushrooms are just evidence, that visible evidence of that invisible mother that's under the earth. So that's
I love the kind of contradiction. For when you think of mothering, you think of like bringing together and hugging and wanting to hold, yet the fungi they're going out. It's this outward motion. So you have, I mean, I find it very, very poetic, very beautiful, and I can't wait to see the piece in person. And just quickly, one for Jen too. I'm really curious if your canvases are all the same size. And I also agree that seeing them in the physical space is going to be so amazing. But my question really was, how did you decide on that size, and how did you decide where to punctuate or to break, you know, or interrupt the words? Like, how did you make those decisions where to put the return? Because I find that really fascinating, how you made those choices.
It's basically the format. That's how it fit in a 8 foot tall by 5 foot wide, divided into 144 spaces. That's
Okay, so very mathematical and serendipitous. Okay, well, I love that. I love that. I think that's really interesting when you think about sort of internet and the space on screens and how, you know, knowledge is stretched and compressed in the way that we think. So I love that. I can't wait to see both the works. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Beth.
So it's actually 1 p.m. and I think that we're probably close now to wrapping up. On behalf of all of us, I wanted to thank both the artists, Jennifer Lee Webb and Janice Ray Cheney, for this wonderful presentation, for sharing something that, yes, as Beth mentioned, actually is very poetic, very timely. We're very fortunate you've had your finger on the pulse and we've benefited. We've seen that and had this discussion. I wanted to thank the UNB Arts Centre, in particular Marie and Laurie and Oliver, for partnering with us for organising all of this. And I will pass it over to Marie to have the last word. And just before I do that, I want to remind you all that it is World Creativity and Innovation Week for all of this week. And World Creativity Day is April the 21st. And so this exhibition and all of this connectivity is falling right in the center of that. And I think if for any of you who want it, because all of their events now have gone virtual, they are free. You can log on, you can Google and find them, and you can join in talks and events like this in Slovenia and Turkey and Norway and Ireland and wherever you want. So I just wanted to give that reminder, and I'll pass it over to Marie.
Hi there. Sorry, I'm just finding my mute button. Thank you all very much. I think this is a really wonderful way to share this great work, and we do look forward to being able to put it in the gallery someday. But for now, this is where it lives. So like I say, check our website out for more information on this work, and keep your eye on the website for future exhibitions as we're planning and going forward together. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Marie. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Marie. Thank you, Jean.
Bravo.
Thank you, everybody.
Good job.
Take care, everybody.
Stay safe.
Yeah.
Stay connected.
Stay home.
Stay home.